Hello and welcome to the PFLAG LA Podcast. We're here to bridge family, parents, friends, and allies of the queer community. And we're here to provide you with resources, opportunities to learn things, opportunity for support so that you can be a great advocate. Today's guest is going to be Max Joshua. Max is a climate professional and a trans babe from the pond, across the pond is what they say, right? And my name is Thomas Callahan. I'll be your co-host. With me is Anthony DeMio. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. And so before we get started, I think it's always good that we kick things off with our word of the day from PFLAG's National Glossary. Today's word is gender-affirming services. So these are non-surgical types of care and support that help transgender people move toward their transition goals in ways that feel right for them. This can include things like electrolysis, laser hair removal, voice training, or even finding clothing and accessories that feel affirming and authentic. Um, and if you want to know more about this term and other definitions, you can always visit pflag.org website for more words and explanations.
Thank you, Anthony. And along with being informed, we also like to get involved. So we always like to bring to your attention something that's happening in the community. Pride Month is June, but West Hollywood is getting ready already for Pride Month, and they're going to be having their WeHo Pride Arts Festival. And that's on May 23rd and May 24th at the Los Angeles LGBT Center, right in the heart of Los Angeles. So it's a great day. It's free. It's 2 days. It's about from 9 to 4 o'clock. There'll be workshops. There'll be authors. There'll be creative activities and just opportunities to meet people. So you might want to put that on your calendar, May 23rd and 24th. And we'll have the link for that on our website as well, on our YouTube website. And then a reminder, if you have a term you would like us to address, or perhaps you have an event you would like us to promote, or you have an idea for a guest, we would welcome that as well. Our email is podcast@pflagla.org.
Thank you so much, Thomas. And so Thomas introduced a little bit about our guests, but I want to go and introduce them even further. So I want to introduce our guest, Max Joshua, pronouns she, her. Max is a climate professional and a self-described trans babe from across the pond who has called Los Angeles home since 2020. Her work focuses on the use of satellite technologies for environmental impact, such as tracking fire and pollution from space. She's also dedicated to fostering queer community in the climate sector, serving as LA chapter lead for Out in Climate. When not working on space missions or LGBTQ plus causes, she can be often found hiking, biking, paddleboarding, or reading poetry around LA. So with that being said, welcome, Max.
Thank you, Anthony and Thomas. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you here. I kind of wanted to start maybe a little bit from the beginning, like before you came to LA, what were you doing and what brought you to LA? So wherever you want to start from.
Yeah, let's see. Back in the early 90s, my parents met in a hippie community in the north of Scotland. We could take it all the way back there. And from my early years, my mum would take me out biking and hiking in the hills of Scotland. And I feel like that's where I sort of trace back my environmental interests. That was kind of what drew me to LA. So I lived most of my adult life in London in the UK, just a year in Paris besides that. But almost all my adult life, I'd lived in London. I was working on this space science mission at the time in the 2010s. And I kind of wanted to move, I wanted an adventure. I wanted to live abroad. There's a whole world out there. And I was just ready to go and explore it and sort of throw myself into something new. A lot of my friends had moved away from London. I just felt it was time for a change. And at the same time, they'd sent me on literally 5 entire months of business trips to the US in 2019. And at that point, I'm like, just moving to the US, this is stupid. Why are we doing this? And so I proposed to them hey, why don't you move me to the US? And they said, yes, it makes sense. Let's do it. And I had some latitude to choose where to go. There were a few different cities that made sense. I never really thought of LA as a place to be. I like movies, but I wasn't drawn to it. But then after visiting, several times just for like different work things over the years. After visiting several times, I always had just a delightful time. And I really love the natural environment. The fact that you have like world-class, at least to my English perspective, world-class beaches, you have beautiful mountains, you have forests, you have desert, you have all this amazing flora and fauna here. And it's very different from anything that I grew up with in Scotland or England or that I'm used to. So that all felt really special to me. Like, yeah, LA is a huge global city. There's a lot of cool cultural stuff going on. There's a lot happening. All those things are great. But what actually drew me here was just the natural environment.
I love that. I love that. I'm jealous. I have never been across the pond. My parents went to London recently, and I was jealous. So you'll have to, later we'll talk more about what that space is like. But I'm always jealous when people
I
have
can
gone
give you
there.
some recommendations. If you like rain and if you like beans on toast and if you like good humor, we've got good jokes. We've got a lot of good things for you.
Good. Yeah, I lived in Washington State for many years, so I'm used to overcast
Yes,
weather.
you know the vibe.
Yes, I know the vibe very well. So it probably is calling my name to get there. Now, can you share a little bit about the work that you're doing now in LA? Because, we talked a little bit about you're the LA chapter lead for Out in Climate. Just a little bit about that and other stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, Out in Climate is some volunteer work that I do, and then I have like my main job as well. So, Out in Climate is a nonprofit that seeks to uplift and support queer climate professionals. Um, Basically, there's a whole bunch of queer people who work in climate, but we don't often get opportunities to connect with each other along that axis of who we are. But when you do, when there's an event at a conference or an event in your city that is specifically for like queer climate professionals or people who are trying to get into that field, then you're just able to like be vulnerable and be authentic and connect with people more quickly than you can in your classic, straight work professional environment. So it's been just like selfishly a great vehicle for me to meet really good people who care about the same things as I do and who maybe have some similar perspective to me. And it's been good fun. And, hopefully doing some good by helping people just feel more at home in the world of climate and environmental work, because it's like an all hands on deck situation, right? The global climate crisis, worsening environmental disasters. Like, we need as many good minds working on this as we can. And so if we can help everybody feel like there's a place for them in the climate movement, then that helps.
I agree.
Uh, were you bumping into any issues within that climate culture?
Yeah, I mean, climate is one of the better like work domains. So at the time when I joined Out in Climate, I was working on a satellite mission for monitoring methane emissions, methane and CO2 emissions. And some of the users were like energy regulators, and they're pretty progressive types. But some of the users are like oil and gas companies, and they're not very progressive types. And all of those people kind of live in the climate sphere. Even the oil and gas companies, they have a lot of like climate related employees. They have a lot of emissions analysts, those kind of things. They all live in the climate sphere, but the culture can be quite different, you know? And similarly, like if we're talking about people who do like carbon financial instruments or something, like they can be kind of tech finance bro-y, Whereas if we're talking about like conservation nonprofit folks, like they're probably queer as hell. So it really varies a lot throughout the sector.
Right.
Because I wonder, like, living your life openly queer, like, how has that experience been? And how was that transition? Like, you talked a little bit about into your work. Have they sometimes, is it a good meeting of the minds, or is there conflict sometimes between living openly queer and then going to work?
Yeah, it can be a challenge, like to be frank about it. So I got laid off back in February of 2024, took a sabbatical, best time of my life. That was great. But then I started looking for more work, and it was quite hard to find the right culture, especially when you're looking for the right thing to lend your time and energy to and to sustain you financially. And you're like, well, yeah, I need to be pragmatic about it because nothing is perfect, but I also just want to feel good around these people. And I want to not have to like worry about how they're perceiving me. I want to just get on and do the work, without any weird attitudes. And yeah, it can be tough. Partly it's like a practical limit of, I've always been like a business development person for most of my career. And that entails going out places, like I mentioned, traveling a ton to the US in my earliest job. That involves going to other places to meet people a lot of the time. And there's just a lot of places that I can't go anymore as a visibly trans person. So like, I have traveled to like the UAE before, and I'm not legally allowed to exist there now. They would turn me away at best if I got there. And that applies in a lot of US states at the moment. So yeah, it puts limits on the work that you can actually do effectively, like where you can be. Like I can't, not that I'm trying to, but I can't be in the US military, for example, because I'm trans. And similar stuff in federal spaces. It's difficult. So yeah, it does create a lot of limits. What I try and do is when I was looking for work, for example, or even just when I'm trying to network with people, or engage with different like professional groups, like I'm trying to suss out the vibe. And when I was interviewing, I would ask sort of questions like, oh, do you have any queer employees? Always a good sign if they do. If they do have queer employees, or even if they don't, like, do they have a group for queer employees or for other underrepresented groups? Is it something they've even thought about? Is that kind of diversity something they value? As in, do they value having people from diverse backgrounds that maybe will bring different perspectives to the same problem? Because we just have very different lives, So yeah, it can be quite tough. And yeah, Out in Climate helps with that. And also just having like uplifting friends and family and social spaces and stuff, that sort of helps stay grounded as well, even when work environments aren't good. So the field that I work in now is wildfire monitoring. And that's an interesting one because it's very bipartisan. Because it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, like if a fire is going to come and burn down your house, you give a shit, You can't deny that it exists, like methane emissions. Like it's definitely happening. So it's an interesting one because, yeah, it is quite bipartisan, and like emergency services and first responders is a real mix of all kinds of people. But I haven't had any issues so far. Like I've only been doing that kind of work for the last 11 months now, so I'm relatively new still, but the vibes have been good.
What about the organization itself? Do they provide support for you if there were to be a case of discrimination or something like that?
Yeah. Thankfully, it hasn't happened yet, but I think it comes from the top, honestly, or it comes from the top and whoever else is involved in forming the identity of an organization. And I didn't know what to expect from that, honestly. But the executive director and all of my close colleagues have been like relentlessly supportive, in using the right pronouns and that kind of stuff. And that just sets the tone for everybody else.
Mhm.
So like we had a contractor who got it wrong. And then the next sentence, one of my colleagues is like, oh yeah, she's going to blah, blah, blah. And that just quickly corrects it quite gracefully. So it's a small organization. We have, I think, 9 employees now and some contractors who help out. So it's a small organization, so they don't have like a group for me to join, obviously. I'm the only queer employee, or at least the only openly queer employee. But everybody seems very supportive, which is good.
I love to hear that when companies, even if they're small, are supportive. It's very helpful.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, this is like an environmentally focused nonprofit, so that helps too. But you never know.
Right, yeah. Even in other ones, you're always like, there's always work we can do.
You can't assume. So like, for example, I have been told that Boeing has one of the best like trans healthcare policies of any company. And I'm like, Boeing, I mean, people will be listening to this. I'm not going to say Boeing is evil, but they're not my favorite company, but they have a great policy for trans employees. So it is complicated sometimes.
Right. It's never as easy as we would like it to be or as it should be. Right.
Not always straightforward. And you can't assume.
What's your experience been like openly queer in the United States versus the queer experience overseas? Like, what are some of the differences? What was that like for you?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I think the US is very polarized and people often live in their own sort of specific bubbles. And so the experience of being me in like Houston, for example, at a work event was very different to the experience of being me and living in Long Beach, you know? Or even in other parts of LA. Like I've experienced street harassment in LA. I've been kicked out of the bathroom in a bar in Orange County. And I've had a lot of very positive experiences. Or even I was on a work trip about a month ago in Colorado, just driving through to do some hikes. And I was driving through sort of like more backwoodsy areas, like west and south of Denver. And people were like so friendly to me. And I don't know how those people vote, or even road tripping through Utah. I road tripped through Utah a whole bunch in 2024. And everybody was so polite, so kind, gendered me correctly. But Utah votes Republican. I'm like, it's hard to predict. Even the international thing is interesting because my dad lives in Germany in the border near to France. And so when I visit him, we'll often like hop over to go and see a Christmas market or something in France. And French people, for whatever reason, didn't happen much this last time, but earlier in my transition, I would get misgendered more in France than in Germany, like a noticeable amount. I'm like, why is that? You know, it's because they're right next to each other. These towns are like less than an hour drive apart, and yet they would gender me differently. And so I don't know if it's because the accent that I speak French with is different to like English or German, or if they just have different social expectations of what feminine and masculine expression is like. But yeah, it's quite interesting. And then I could talk about access to healthcare and medication and stuff too, but I don't want to ramble too much.
No, I mean, I think it's also helpful just for people because, like you said, queer people are going across the sea. Like they want to see what's the climate. They're kind of, no pun intended, right? With the work you do, but what's the climate like? When they get there, and so I think any information you share is really helpful.
Yeah, and there are some resources that I use. For example, when thinking about work-related travel or even just fun travel in the US and abroad. I can't remember what I've used for abroad before, but there are a couple of resources that I found online that have like maps of which nations have protections against hate crimes, or which nations can you change your gender by self-determination, which ones have access to HRT, which ones will allow you to do like legal name and gender change, that kind of stuff. So I can't remember which specific sites they were for the international space now, but there are some websites that can tell you and give you a sense. And obviously you can Google it, or you can like ask your AI assistant or whatever, but there's a couple of good websites out there. And similarly for the US, there's a really good map from a reporter called Erin in the Morning, who you two might be familiar with, but she does a lot of journalism on the trans legislation situation, and she has a legislative risk map of the US that she updates every month or something. And so I can look at it, I can see like, oh, in Idaho, I could spend 5 years in jail for trying to use the bathroom. So guess I'm not going to travel to Idaho. In Montana, those laws did not make it through, and I'm actually okay to use the bathroom and drive a car and all those things. So, it can be hard to stay on top of it, but those kind of resources have helped me at least be able to take a quick look and be like, can I go there? Should I go there? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Southern Poverty Center, too, is another organization that they once sent me a map of where all the hate groups were in the United States with dots, and it was a bit overwhelming, but
That's
that's what
scary,
they
but yeah,
do.
it's a good
Yeah,
guide of
that's what they do.
places not to go.
Right, right.
Wow.
Now, obviously, living queer and being queer can, especially in the time that we're at right now, can be very taxing. So I always like to ask people, what do you do to take care of yourself? Like hobbies, things to do to find joy in your everyday life?
Um, I mean, there's a whole bunch. I think specifically if I'm feeling like, if I've been getting misgendered or if I've been feeling uncomfortable in some spaces, it's definitely feels recharging to me to spend time in queer community. And even if I am traveling to see family or for work or something, if I have the time, I actually love to get out and like go to a local queer venue. Like a lot of places might just have like a gay bar or something, but if somewhere has like a museum or something like that, I really enjoy that, or a group. I really enjoy being able to just like meet some queer local people, or even organize an event with Out in Climate, right? Like New York Climate Week I went to, and we had an event. I was like, that's great. I can meet loads of queer people and just relax, fully just chill and be myself at that event. So yeah, I think seeking out queer spaces helps. For me, as you probably gathered, I try to be quite outdoorsy. I really like spending time in nature. So paddleboarding, hiking, biking, all that stuff is great. Used to do some boxing, I like reading, writing, and sometimes performing poetry, just hanging out with friends, watching movies, eating food, all the usual stuff that people enjoy. But yeah, that's what helps to keep me feeling good. And then like standard sort of mental health practices like journaling, journaling and reflecting on life and those kind of things, that just helps to stay balanced as well.
Do you have any, because, people in LA, the stereotype, we love to go hiking, but they usually just do Runyon Canyon. But do you have any, do you have any other like hiking spots that you want to, promote or let people know that there are other hiking spots other than Runyon Canyon?
Yeah, I guess in the LA area, I really like an alpine environment. I'm not really a desert girly. I like something a little, doesn't have to be altitude, but a little colder and with trees and stuff I like. So I really like Ice House Canyon, which is on the way to Mount Baldy. It's in that same area, but instead of turning into like the Mount Baldy path, you turn out a different direction. It's just really nice. And if you go there like late in the year or early in the year, you'll get some little patches of snow on the ground, lots of nice pine trees, lots of animals, and it's quite quiet too. So I really like that. Also, there's good stuff around Big Bear. I went and did a little segment, a tiny overnight segment of the Pacific Crest Trail near Big Bear last month, I think, or March. Yeah, last month. And that was really lovely as well. My favorite spot, at least that springs to mind, is have either of you heard of the bristlecone pine forest?
Yes, I have.
Oh, hell yeah. Okay. So yeah. So bristlecone pine trees, they're this super old tree. It's like a relative of sequoias and redwoods. And they're the oldest living non-clonal, so individual organisms in the world. And they're these like 5,000-year-old trees that grow sort of like over thousands of years, all twisted and gnarled on remote hillsides. And there's some of them, there's a cluster of them in like, I guess, East Central California, near Bishop, if you know where that is. So it's like east of Yosemite.
Okay.
If you go up the backside of the mountains there, kind of north of Death Valley, there's these like beautiful old trees. And I've been there a couple of times and really love it. It feels very timeless. Anthony knows all about it.
You know
So
more. I mean, I grew up camping with my dad a lot. He would take me
Oh,
like every
amazing.
summer. He'd be like, "Okay, I'm going to take you away for a week," and he would like plot a place, and he would say, "We're going to be here for the week. We're going to hike here, go to there," and my mom would pick us up where we were supposed to be at the end. But it was just kind of like a survival trip for a week for me and my dad. So I love the outdoors. I don't go out as often as I should or could. So I live vicariously through you when I hear your stories about where you go through.
That sounds really lovely. My parents like the outdoors, but they weren't like survivalists, that's for sure. So you probably have a lot more skills than me, actually. I'm sure I could learn a lot.
I was looking at one of your websites, and it was an event in Seattle, Forest Frolicking.
Forest frolicking, that sounds so good.
That sounds like fun. I'll do that.
I'll take a frolic, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't frolicked through the forest in a long time.
Should be weekly, I think, they say.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I just love the outdoors. Like, I think for me, it's like I get to breathe the nice air, I get to reflect and just drown out the noises of the city and everything else.
Yeah, there's a lot of noise, especially with like social media and being always online and push notifications and all that stuff. Like our attention's being pulled a lot of different directions. So I find spending time in nature I get to just focus. There is actually like, there's a queer element to it too, in the sense that when I'm out in nature and I'm alone, I'm hiking alone, whatever, I am just being myself, like my purest self, unperceived by other humans, All the social layers are stripped away. And that just feels very refreshing, very freeing. Because whenever I'm in society, people are perceiving me different ways. They're coming with different attitudes. And it's not that I'm like performing for the view of other people, but I think subconsciously, you know, we do adjust to how other people are
Mhm.
behaving towards us, treating us. It just creates a layer of like baggage on top of
Sure.
just being your relaxed, pure self.
Mhm.
I love that. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful way of thinking about it.
Back to your work environment, do you bump into any kinds of security issues where you need
What
clearance
kinds of
and
security issues are you thinking?
well, part of your job is that are you dealing with confidential issues, so does security clearance become an issue?
Yeah, this is a problem actually as someone who has worked in the space industry quite a long time. My interest in the space industry has always been science and environmentalism, but most of what fuels the space industry is defense and intelligence. It's like military stuff. And when I was interviewing for jobs, I did consider a couple that would have required a security clearance, but I was like, I don't think they're going to give me a security clearance. In theory, perhaps I could get it. I do know a non-binary person who has a clearance, for example. But as recently as I think the late 90s, I think it was late 90s, like trans people and cross-dressers and anyone with any kind of gender variance were not allowed a clearance. And given that trans people aren't allowed to serve in the military anymore, you're not allowed pronouns in the federal world anymore, all that sort of stuff, that stupid stuff. Any job that depended on having a security clearance did not seem like a reliable path for me, you know? So the space that I work in right now, it's mostly about delivering satellite fire data to fire agencies, firefighters, scientists. So I don't really have to engage in that defense space much.
Mhm.
I wanted to also talk about because we use the word of the day, gender affirming services, but there are a lot of new terms that the new generation of young people are using all the time to describe gender affirming services. I want to talk about, are there any that stick out to you? Because I know there's some that stick out to me, like looks maxing is one that's being used a lot, but there's a lot of other ones. Are there any ones that stick out to you that you want to share?
Yeah, totally. I wrote some down actually after we talked about this. So
Wonderful.
let's see. I put a few that, yes, people might not know. This one actually was brought up in, I think, in a Senate hearing recently or something. I can't remember why, because they get into a lot of trans issues for some reason. But an egg is a trans person who hasn't realized that they're trans yet. So they're like an egg that's going to hatch.
Interesting.
And so, you know, an egg, you know, let's say someone thinks they're a cisgender man, they might find themselves engaging with like a lot of like trans memes or something and being like, so relatable. And then they're like, wait a minute, you know, gives them some pulse. Another one is, this is a fun one. So we know about euphoria, right? And gender euphoria might be if you feel like, oh, I'm looking really good today. I'm looking really feminine or I'm looking really masculine or whatever. Euphoria is where you get discriminated against, but in an affirming way. So let's say I'm like, I bend over into my car's trunk and someone catcalls me. I'm like, that's gross, but also like, oh, I feel so feel so feminine and cute. Or another one is like for trans women is like being just talked over or ignored in a conversation. And it's like, wow, it's because they see you as a real woman. So that's euphoria. Or trans men might get like horrible, like bro-y remarks or something. And they're like, oh, they see me as one of the bros. Great. What else have I got? Yeah, I thought a fun one was, you mentioned looks maxing, which is about trying to maximize your appearance to meet aesthetic ideals. But it's quite a toxic term. It comes from like the incel community, the involuntary celibate community, as they like to be called. And that's been transferred to a lot of different contexts. So you could be like, oh, I'm like femme maxing, or I'm like trans maxing, or whatever. And the idea is that you're just maximizing your aesthetic for a particular aesthetic ideal. A fun one is that some trans women like to call each other in jest is brick. Like, oh, you're such a brick. And it's just like a roast, basically. It's saying like, oh, you look like a big square block. Like that is your build. It's pretty mean.
Well,
But
there
there's
was always there was an R&B song. She was a brick house.
She was a brick. Maybe that's where it comes from.
He was a
I don't know the
Probably,
origin,
yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
It could well.
Yeah.
Okay, and the opposite of a brick would be like fish. So fish. And that means you're looking like super feminine. You can't be distinguished from any other woman. You're like unclockable, you know? That's a fun one. And one I'll mention because it's become kind of prominent recently is just doll. Because there's this whole like protect the dolls thing, that kind of movement. So doll is like a term for femmes, you know, like feminine expressing people that was historically used in ballroom culture where like queer people of color would create their own underground spaces and parties and pageants, like a whole culture. And so I'm sure you both know, and people listening might know as well, there's been this like protect the dolls movement, Pedro Pascal wearing a t-shirt with it, that kind of stuff, about protecting trans women basically, or like feminine gender non-conforming people, because they do tend to experience a higher threat of violence, sadly. So when people say like, I think it's a great movement, I also would not identify as one of the dolls because it's kind of like a queer people of color term. And so it probably doesn't apply to me, you know, but there's some debate over that. It's evolving.
That's the beauty of our community. So many new terms to make people feel seen and heard and accepted are constantly changing and evolving. And I love that.
Yeah, and play around with too, right? So like, similar to fish, something I'll say, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on the podcast, so edit it out if you want, but I'll be like, oh, I look so cunty today. Like, and that's when I'm like, damn, I look good.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of my trans friends use that all the time. I see it even in like just like everyday like reality TV shows. Like
Yeah.
we see terms that were sometimes originated in the queer culture, like now in the lexicon of just everyday use of society, and so we see it used all the time. But also sometimes it changes from what we used it as in our community to something else.
Yeah, the terms change over time. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of stuff on there, different terms. Yeah. Gender affirming services, I always tell people, I was like, I got laser hair removal when I started it like in college, and it was the best decision of my life because I just didn't want facial hair at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was the best decision I ever made, and I didn't have to shave as much and didn't have as much like razor burn and acne stuff. But whenever I tell people that, they either assume that I'm trans or I want to transition because I don't want facial hair, or they're like, "But don't you want to grow facial hair?" And I said, "No, I really don't. This affirms who I am. I don't want facial
Yeah.
hair at all, please."
People just, I think people can understand, like, my grandmother can understand, like, okay, there's men and there's women. And men like all these things and women like all these things. But people get confused when it's like, actually, there's a few things about the stereotype that I don't want or that don't align with who I am, you know? So I'm like, yeah, I'm more on the female side of the spectrum. But like, I like my toxic combat sports. I like boxing and wrestling and that kind of stuff, you know? I was never into like playing with dolls as a kid. That's just not my vibe. So whether it's about behaviors or it's about appearances, like, especially in LA, it is quite delightful that there's a lot of people who really do just, they mix and match what feels true to them and authentic to them.
Yeah. Great thing about, Anthony, you mentioned terminology. There's so much terminology, it changes, but it's all in support of trying to get people to think that it's not extremes. There's a whole spectrum of gender, of energies, of whether someone has some male and female, and maybe they do this and that is attached to that. But I feel like we're trying to break it down so that you can show up anywhere on that spectrum and it's okay.
I don't even think of it as like, I think the spectrum is a helpful concept for people to wrap their head around, but I don't even think of it that way. I think about it more as like different modes of expression. Because we all express ourselves in different ways as we communicate with people and live our lives. And it's like, some of my modes of expression might be more feminine, some might be more masculine. And like, I'm a trans woman, but I don't think I'm the same as a cis woman because I've had a different upbringing and I have a whole bunch of feminine modes of expression that come naturally to me. And there's others that don't really come naturally to me. And there's other more masculine modes of expression, like I like boxing, right? I like
Mhm.
punching people in the face. And that's not typically a feminine activity. Obviously, women can enjoy that too, but it's not associated
Right.
with femininity,
Mhm.
you know? But it's just like we have all these hobbies and mannerisms and physical features that can be labeled masculine or feminine, and it even varies culture to culture and country to country. And it's just the sum of all those things that determine how we get gendered. So it's pretty complicated, but then people just try and put us in one of two boxes.
Right,
So I'm
right.
like,
Yeah.
all right, if you're going to put me in one, two boxes,
Yeah.
it's this one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Try and make it easy for them.
Right.
I'd like to ask you sort of a general type of question. Do you have any advice? I mean, I really appreciate how you, when you were job interviewing, how you took care of yourself to make sure that, well, is this going to be a fit? And to come right out and ask, which maybe I wouldn't do. But do you have any advice for people for how to be out there in the world and to take care of yourself yet accomplish what you want to?
So be out there in the world, take care of yourself, but still be able to do the things you want to do in life. Yeah, it is tough. I think that for people who are not sure if they're queer or who are still figuring it out or who are still sort of coming out in all areas of their life, I think that what helped me the most was I went into my transition quite slowly with a lot of support from my closest friends and family. So I told my partner first, and then I told my closest friends who I knew would react, or who I hoped would react well. And then I told my closest family, and then I told my less close friends. And as I widened the circle, like I was continually uplifted by the support of all the people that I had told before. So it kind of helped
Mhm.
me. Whereas if I just immediately went and told like my my least supportive family, I would have got a bad reaction and I probably would have felt pretty
Right.
hurt.
Yeah.
But by the time they found out, I already had so much support from everybody else that it was easy to weather it, you know? And I think
Mhm.
that just applies in general. Like even at work, if you're not out yet and you want to come out, I think telling the people that you trust the most so that they can support you and then help back you up as an ally when you come out more broadly, when you feel ready, that really helps.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that's one. I was worried that transitioning would kill my career prospects as well, to be honest, because I think it was only it's not so long ago that trans people were just considered like completely mentally ill, you know, and unfit for any kind of real job or that kind of stuff, you know? And some people still think that way. So I was kind of worried that that would hold me back and make it hard for me to have a career. But I was wrong, actually. So yeah, shortly after, maybe like what, a year after I came out and had been transitioning openly in my work life and personal life and stuff, like I got a way better job that paid way more money and was focused on methane emissions instead of being focused on space science, which I was kind of over by that point.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it was a massive upgrade. And maybe I would have got it if I hadn't transitioned, but I think the fact that I had transitioned just allowed me to show up everywhere in my life with less baggage and more
Right.
authentically.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a biggie. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, yeah, I guess a comment on like, to me, it's very important to be part of society and not feel excluded from it. There are some queer people or trans people who do prefer to spend as much of their time as possible exclusively in queer spaces, or the extreme is even like exclusively in online spaces. And they kind of pull back from the rest of the world. And that could be for safety, or it could be just like someone's particular brand of neurodivergence or whatever, right? Could just be because there's no other queer people in their area if they're in like a pretty small town or something. So there are people who choose to live like that. But for me, I really need to feel like I am part of society, like I have a local community, and just like we're all human beings. I don't want to shut out the rest of the world. So I do try and put myself out there, but then I need those queer spaces to recharge afterwards or in between. That's how I balance.
I guess if you had a message to our listeners or anyone else, anything uplifting you want to leave on a note for our listeners, I always give the floor to you to leave whatever message you want to leave.
I probably should have thought about this beforehand.
I know I
Let's
put
see.
you on the spot.
I think the message that I would just give, like, spontaneously is it's never too late. So for me, I transitioned somewhat late in life, well after puberty. And in hindsight, like, I often wished that I could be a girl and grow older as a woman. And I had a whole bunch of female mannerisms that I just stamped out because of negative social feedback, right? And so I just didn't realize it was a possibility for myself. That's why, I didn't see a trans person in my life until I was like 18 plus, I think, like after I moved to London. I didn't know it was a thing. And even if it was a thing, I didn't think it could be for me because, I'm like, oh, I'm too tall, my shoulders are too broad, my voice is too deep, whatever reason. And so I just didn't believe it was a possibility. So yeah, I think, and I'm on like the trans subreddits and stuff, and people are like, oh, it's too late for me. And then in the comments, they're like, how old are you? And they're like, oh, I'm 18. And I'm like, no, it's not too late for you. It's never too late. Whether you're trans or whether you just want to express yourself differently, like, I want to do my makeup today. I want to wear my hair a certain way, like whatever it is. It's never too late to learn more about yourself and encourage your self-expression and just have fun and get creative with it in a non-judgmental way.
Very
Yes.
nice.
Well, thank you, Max, for
Happy
being
chat.
with us today. We really appreciate it. And thank you for sharing your life. And, hopefully we've touched some people who will be inspired by your story. So thank you for being with us today. That's our podcast for this month, the PFLAG Podcast. We're available on all the platforms, YouTube, the website is also where you can find us. Thanks to Jethro and Gabriella, who helped behind the scenes with social media. Farah was not with us today. That was our other co-host. She'll be back with us. Be sure to tune in and spread the word. We appreciate that you come to listen and come to see us offer this advice. So until next time, take care of yourself and take care of each other. Thank you.